120 young men cannot satisfy the goddess. Obscene pictures are hung in the bedroom to sexually enlighten the newlyweds. A wife recites incantations while applying oil to her husband. Nocturnal ejaculation works better than any financial coach. Anyway, we tell you what sex was like in Mesopotamia and how wild the customs of those years seem today. The inhabitants of ancient Mesopotamia were no strangers to sexual displays, just like us, but while we have movies and books to pique our interest, the Sumerians and Akkadians had myths about gods and clay tablets. From these, we now know many wonderful stories involving gods in one way or another, and especially the chief goddess of the Sumerian pantheon, Inanna, known to the Akkadians as Ishtar. In the stories about her, there are many erotic and sometimes to modern eyes quite obscene plots. For example, during the excavations of the ancient city of Nippur, a poem was found in which Ishtar offers a young man to have sex with her right in front of the gates of the city, and still requires to call friends in the number of 119 people. Another story known to us from Professor Gerald Cooper's lecture, Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Sex in Babylonian, tells of a mortal gardener named Sexuality who to his misfortune caught the sleeping goddess Ishtar in a neighboring garden. The mortal man thought of nothing cleverer than to take advantage of her sound sleep. After satisfying his lust, the young man realized what he had done and fled in horror, lost among the Sumerians. When the goddess woke up, she discovered the traces of Sexuality's violent activities and became furious. She searched for the villain for a long time, causing untold misery to the people, and finally asked the god Enki for help. He showed her the place where the lover of the sleeping goddesses was hiding. The horrified gardener begged for his life, to which Ishtar calmly replied, "You will die now, but rejoice, for all future generations will sing songs about the fact that you made love to a goddess." Then she brutally killed him. Whether the gardener rejoiced, realizing that he had become famous in the ages, or screamed in horror before his death, the myth does not specify. The myth of divine kinship was also present in the mythology of Mesopotamia, where one of the supreme gods was the same Enki mentioned above. In the legend of Enki and Ninhursag, it is said that the god once thrust his phallus into the dam and plunged it into the thicket of reeds, and then demanded that the goddess Ninhursag, the oldest female deity in the Sumerian pantheon, lie down for him in the swamp and have coitus with him, which gave birth to his daughter Ninsar. And then strange things began. Enki desired his daughter, and his granddaughter, Ninkor, was born. He desired his granddaughter, and his great-granddaughter, Ninimah, was born. The great-granddaughter in turn gave birth to great-grandfather Utu, his great-great-granddaughter. Her divine grandfather also seduced her by bribing her with cucumbers, apples, and grapes. Ninhursag intervened by taking the great-great-grandfather's seed out of Utu's womb. This seed produced some useful plants, which Enki immediately ate. This was the last straw for the mother goddess, who cursed the god and left. The curse was so strong that he immediately howled in pain and suffered divinely for a long time. No one could persuade the angry Ninhursag to forgive Enki until a fox took up the cause, seduced by the god's promise to place a pole in the town square with banners praising the red-tailed beauty. After covering herself with aromatic oils, the fox persuaded the goddess, and she began to heal the one she had cursed. And she healed him with the help of sex, giving birth to one child for each ailing part of the god's body, 8 in all. Looking at such a debauched life of the Mesopotamian gods, one might think that mortals were not far behind. And we'd be both right and wrong. On the one hand, the sex life of women in Mesopotamia was quite strictly regulated. A daughter belonged to her father and a wife to her husband, so in the case of adultery or other disreputable sexual behavior, the men decided what to do with the women. On the other hand, sexual practices permeated the entire life of the ancient people. And often these practices were associated with magic. For example, on the walls of bedrooms were often depicted sexual scenes of man and woman having sex. According to historian Ekaterina Markina, these paintings were primarily used to protect against evil spirits, but could also be a kind of textbook for newlyweds. Most often such frescoes depict sex on the bed, but Professor Gerald Cooper gives another example. On the cylindrical seal, an ancient image of adultery was found. The lover lies on his back, on top of a woman, and next to her husband, who is beating her with a stick. In general, there are many images with sexual connotations. In addition to depictions of sex in bed, the most frequent subject is a man having sex with a woman in a backwards position, with his partner sipping beer from a pitcher through a straw. The same Gerald Cooper, in his article, Sex Work: The Social and Economic Role of Prostitutes in Ancient Mesopotamia, writes that these were symbolic representations of sex with a prostitute in a tavern, and that beer was simply used as a symbol of debauchery. In general, the world of prostitution in ancient Mesopotamia was very diverse. In addition to the lowest street priestesses of love, there were tavern keepers and dancers. There were privileged temple prostitutes, and the famous father of history, Herodotus of Halicarnassus, mentioned the Babylonian custom when every woman was obliged to give herself to a stranger once in her life at the temple of Ishtar. Magic permeated all sexuality in ancient Mesopotamia. In addition to the tablets mentioned above, other techniques were used in the bedroom. To increase potency, men used the following ritual. A harp string was taken, 3 knots were tied to it, then a special incantation was repeated 7 times, after which the string was tied around both hands. Women, on the other hand, used incantations to keep a man at their side. Researcher M.J. Geller, in the article, Freud, Magic in Mesopotamia, How Magic Works, writes that such incantations were often recommended to rub aromatic oils on a man's genitals. It can be assumed that this increased the power of the spells by an order of magnitude. In addition to incantations, there were also sexual omens and divination with the help of sex. Researcher Anne Kessler-Guinan, in her book Auguries of Hegemony, The Sex Omens of Mesopotamia, cites many of them. If a man allowed himself to have sex with a woman in the rider's position, it was believed that she would drain all his energy and that the patron god would turn away from him for a month. It was also discouraged for a woman to repeatedly grab a man's penis, in which case the gods would refuse to answer his prayers. But self-satisfaction was encouraged. If a man jumped up during a conversation in bed, began to masturbate, and then ejaculated, it was believed that he would be granted happiness and jubilation. If the ejaculation took place in a dream and the man was covered with it, the omen said, "Wealth awaits the man, he will have financial gain." There were even more amusing omens. It was believed that urinating in taverns, which also served as brothels, would deprive a man of wealth, but there was a sure remedy. Simply urinate on the door on the right and left. The strangest omen is given in the book, Ancient Divination and Experience, by researcher Lindsay G. Dreidiger Murphy. If a man has sexual intercourse with a woman while intoxicated and constantly defecating, that man is joyful, he has no mind, sorrow is hidden from him. Well, where is a video about the ancient world without the aforementioned father of history, Herodotus? In his tales about Babylonians' lives, he describes a tradition where once a year in villages, eligible girls were collected and sold at a bride auction. The most beautiful one went first, and of course, the money battles began for her, with the proceeds going into a common pot. When all the pretty girls got married, the poor were left with the less attractive ones. However, they still received a dowry made from the money paid for the beautiful girls. The father of history praises and approves this custom, which allows to arrange all the brides and to give dowry to those who are deprived of it because of poverty. As you can see, several thousand years ago in the sweltering Mesopotamia, passions were boiling, and a time traveler could look into a local tavern, drink a beer and chat with local beauties, or even buy a bride. The main thing to remember is that Ishtar Inanna is not only the goddess of sex, but also of war, which says a lot about the temperament of the ancient people.